Welcome back, everyone. It's 10 to 2. We shall now resume the inquiry. Good afternoon. I asked over lunch for the parties to have a look at the tables that Mr. Best submitted, the revised tables. Has everyone had the opportunity to have a look at those?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
And Mr. Barrett, it was almost inevitable, really, that I believe Mr. Hodgson has found a couple of errors in the table. Is that right?
He has, and we have suggested that if Mr. Best could produce a document in Word, that Mr. Hodgson could then do track changes that could be seen by Mr. Best, and hopefully we can agree at a final version of the document which is considered by us to be accurate. They are relatively minor points, ma'am, but they are nevertheless, it's important for your consideration that they be got right. So trying to be helpful as we are, if a document can be sent to us, we'll send it back to Mr. Best, showing what we have done to it and why we've done to it, and Mr. Best can then consider it.
Mr. Village, what's your view on that?
Well, I think I apprehend that Mr. Hodgson is about to tell you that, in fact, he's already received said document in Word, and very helpfully and efficiently, he's already responded with tracked changes of what the amendments are, which we're looking at. So we've moved on a little bit, and clearly we want to try and get that to you this afternoon, if we can. Just give me a moment, if I may, Madam, just to sort of.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Hodgson, is that what you're going to advise us on?
Yes, ma'am. They're only some very small changes. I've made them. They're just a couple of typos and a wrong heading. Nothing substantive, but I've made those changes, and I'm sure Mr. Best will be happy to get those across to you very shortly.
Okay, thank you. We'll just wait for Mr. Village to return.
Yeah, well, I'm told that Mr. Best is looking at it now, and we'll get it back to you as soon as we can. We'll get it around the parties as soon as possible.
Okay, if the lead experts could have a look at that, that would be appreciated this afternoon. Okay, just returning to Mr. Williams' evidence and to confirm that I don't have any questions. And I was just going to check whether any of the interested parties here have any questions. Mrs. Job?
I only have one, ma'am. That's all right.
Fire away. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Williams. Just as a planning consultant professional, with regards to harm, we understand in weighing up the planning balance based on benefits, need and harm. With regards to other harm, should it not be taken into account that there will be further potential harm to the green belt? Because if this development is allowed to proceed, it would potentially downgrade this strongly performing greenbelt area and open up the door to further encroachment. Would you consider that another harm, Mr. Williams? Sorry, you've not got your mic on, Mr. Williams, sorry.
Beg your pardon.
Sorry, we didn't hear any of that, Mr. Williams. You didn't have
Sorry,
to.
I'll start again. Yeah. I don't imagine a situation where the development of a crematorium on the appeal site could necessarily open the stable doors for an influx of planning applications within the within this part of the greenbelt. Clearly, you know, the changes to the greenbelt boundaries, they have formed part of the evidence base for the recent review of the local plan. So whilst you can't guarantee, obviously, that there won't be another speculative planning application, you know, I don't imagine, I don't foresee a situation where the grant of planning consent is going to impose a relaxation generally within this part of the Greenbelt.
I understand what you're saying, Mr. Williams. It's just that from Mr. Is it Ladbury's cross-examination evidence, he did point out that building second chapels at existing sites, amongst other reasons, was generally not possible because the areas around the crematoria soon became urbanised, and so the site expansion was not possible. So I suppose for us, it sort of says, so what would lead us to believe that that further development wouldn't happen in this area and lead to further and potential greater harm to the Greenbelt here?
Well, if at a point in time, as an example, Dignity wish to expand the crematorium further, and I've got no information to suggest that that's likely to happen. But if it were to be the case, then clearly, you know, that planning application would have to go through the proper process with a planning application, and it would have to be considered on its merits. You know, it would have to, looking at what's left of the site after this development is built out, should it proceed, then, you know, you're then left with an area of land which is much higher up the slope in landform terms. But, you know, all of those issues would need to be assessed through the proper planning application process.
Sorry, Mr. Williams, it wasn't really regarding you expanding the chapel numbers. It was more referring to the amount of urbanisation around a crematoria, which prevented them from doing so. And so he sort of indicated that there was a lot of urbanisation at following the building of the crematoria. So what we're saying here is, in terms of the harm, by building the crematoria in this location, it's sort of, not only does it breach the encroachment and break the barrier of the Greenbelt, but potentially could encourage further encroachment in and around this very strongly protected bit of Greenbelt.
Yeah, I don't. It's a job. I don't think that's a likely scenario. As I say, given that, you know, the council have recently adopted a local plan which doesn't see the need to release any more Greenbelt in this general area. You know, that plan will run through to 2035. I can't say what's likely to happen beyond that that plan period.
It was just in relation to historic crematoria, who obviously they've been trading for quite some time, 50, 60 years, 70, 80 years. And if the tendency is that, if that's the case, then the likelihood it will be the same on this site as well. So I understand the point. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That was my only question, Mr. Williams. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mrs. Druff. Okay, Mr. Village, would you like to commence your re-examination of Mr. Williams?
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, is the appeal site an appropriate location to meet the needs of the Western Ark crematoria?
Yes, I believe it is. It is in a location which will have a substantial catchment within that generally accepted 30 to 45 minutes drive time. And in that respect, I think it is in a good location to serve that need. Obviously, the drive time figures have been presented to the inquiry, and I think they show that it will be convenient and will provide that relieving effect on the three crematoriums that are in the Western Ark.
And if we turn to the map which is included in Mr. Best's evidence, which I think is, excuse me a moment. There's a map at, I mean, we can use the map which is at shows the 30-minute drive time. Excuse me, I just haven't. It's at figure 6.4 on page 34. Figure 6.4 on page 34. Do you have that?
No, I beg your pardon, I need to turn that off.
In fact, page 58, figure 10.2a, figure 10.2a.
Is that page number? Is the visual electronic?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm using the paper, a paper copy.
Okay.
Sorry for that old-fashioned approach.
So what was it? What was the number again?
Paragraph. Turn to page 10, paragraph 10.9 of his proof of evidence, and you'll see immediately above that a figure 10.2a.
Yes, natural catchment area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got the natural catchment area is the darker shade,
Yeah.
and then you've got the 30-minute drive time, which is in the red line. But are you reasonably familiar with the planning policy designations around Pontefract, Barnsley, and Rotherham?
I have had a look at them. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, you know, it's very much constrained by green belt around settlement edges.
Well, that's really all I wanted to understand between the proposal, between the appeal scheme site and those built-up areas. What, in broad terms, will we find in terms of planning policy designations?
Greenbelt.
So where does this argument get the objectors, the council and Memoria and so on, given that, I mean, they're effectively saying, actually, in fairness, Mrs. Sudders said very clearly this morning she was not suggesting that you should find an alternative site in the Greenbelt, or you should have looked in the Greenbelt. Where does this point get them?
Well, it gets us to a point where we are now, really, that you know, we will end up looking at other potential sites which are equally within the Greenbelt. Be very difficult to assess those sites without, you know, a definitive proposal for those sites to try to work out what the impact of the scheme would be on the openness.
By the way, did you, when you say the impact on the openness, I just want to ask you, that reminds me to ask you this final question. Have you in fact, have you got a view as to the impact of this appeal scheme on the openness of the Greenbelt? I mean, we saw the evidence of Mr. Mitra this morning, and I think I asked 2 questions of him, which led to a sort of a War and Peace re-examination from Mr. Barrett. The question I asked him was his I drew his attention to the suggestion of far-reaching and long-distance views. Is that your assessment?
No, it's not. And you know, my assessment is covered off in my table 1 on page 45 of my proof, where I reference there under landscape and visual impact that the scheme conserves the visual openness of the greenbelt.
Yeah. I've got no further questions of you. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Village and Mr. Williams. Thank you for your contributions. Right, okay. Well, that brings us, I think, to the end of the agenda for today, as was originally set out. I'm conscious it is relatively early. I've been debating whether to try and fit in conditions, but I think, you know, given that we've got time till the 2nd of December, it's probably best to deal with those then, and give me a chance to have a good look through those. Just returning to the point of the updated figures, obviously Mr. Hodgson has had an opportunity to have a look at those. I was just checking who is here today, and I can't see Mr. Mitchell's name on there, but presumably Mr. Robson, Mr. Mitchell would like to have a look at those figures.
Mr. Mitchell has looked at those figures,
Okay.
and we were content with the figures as provided. We haven't seen the small typo suggested by Mr. Hodgson, but in terms of the actual data, no comment.
Okay, thank you. Well, given where we are at the inquiry, our party is happy to deal with any amended table, which is likely to come from Mr. Village's team in submissions.
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Right, thank you very much. Just in relation to the site visit, I think there may be the need to rearrange the site visit, and rather than hold it tomorrow, without wanting to go into too much details. So would need to get another date for that. And you know, I think the inquiry is important, but it's not important enough to put anybody's health at risk, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter. But I think, given there's some time before the 2nd of December, I think there would be the opportunity to rearrange the site visit for another date. I do appreciate that may cause people some inconvenience, but I'd rather take a cautious approach rather than you know, sort of risk putting anyone's health at risk. So that would be my view. So we would need to discuss and circulate potential revised dates. So I mean, I'm probably the most flexible. I'm awaiting a local plan coming in, which hasn't yet. So I'd be interested to hear views from the parties in terms of any suitable dates. And maybe we'll have to arrange it out with the inquiry today.
Ma'am, certainly. Sorry, Mr. Village.
No, do beg your pardon. Carry on.
Madam, I don't think I'd be in a position to give availability at such short notice. Obviously, it can be done over email and through, I suspect, Mrs. Sudders. We can gladly liaise with Mr. Williams from Mr. Village's team and Mr. Mitra.
Well, I think it's Mr. Kirkpatrick that that will be attending on our behalf.
And it would be
at least
leading. Oh, sorry, Mr. Village.
No.
it won't be Mr. Mitra, or we're not intending it to be Mr. Mitra, but to some extent we can be flexible if there's an issue here. I don't think we anticipated this, but Mr. Taylor was going to be available tomorrow, but he would be our preferred choice to attend the site visit with you, ma'am.
Okay, and I think it would be Miss Oxley from the council's team, is that right?
That's right, madam.
Okay, well, apologies for the change in arrangement at short notice, but as I said, I would rather take a cautious approach under current circumstances. So can I leave it with yourselves to liaise with the case officer over an appropriate date, perhaps put forward a selection of dates where your witnesses would be available?
Yes, we'll very happily do that, Ma'am. We're just actually contacting we're just seeing what his availability is, but we can do it, I think, out of the inquiry. It's probably easier, to be honest. Can we just confirm the date, the resumption date? You mentioned, I think, the 2nd of December, but I think,
yeah, sorry,
we were looking at the 30th of November, I think. The 2nd of December is your
first of December, was it not?
30th of November, I think, isn't it?
You wanted the Tuesday,
yeah.
30th of November or 1st of December?
30th of November is the Tuesday, which is what I thought that I suggested. Perhaps I did suggest the Wednesday, but I thought I suggested the Tuesday.
It's been a long week, Mr. Village.
I thought 2nd of December was the date, ma'am, that I think was the date that you were expected when this inquiry was initially scheduled to produce your report by. I could be wrong,
Yes,
but
that's probably where I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
there's an expectation you would do it in 2 days.
No chance. So 30th of November, just to be clear.
Tuesday, the 30th of November, yeah.
Yeah, 10 o'clock.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay then. So just the outstanding things we need to deal with are the updated tables, if those could be submitted by the case officer, preferably with agreement from the parties. The updated position in terms of the development plan policies, if that could be submitted, and again, it would be useful to have that agreed. It should be fairly straightforward. And I think that was probably it in terms of the procedural matters, other than agreeing a date for the site visit.
Which
so
let that be done outside the inquiry by email.
Yeah, indeed. So just to bring sorry, Mr. Barrett, yes.
Just one matter, ma'am. Is it our expectation that there'll be another invitation for the meeting on the 30th of November, or are we to stick to the joining instructions that we currently have?
Could the council confirm that, please?
Don't know, Mr. Barrett.
Ma'am, can I just quickly interrupt? Yes, we can send out another invite.
Okay, that'd be useful, thank you. So I just wanted to thank, before we adjourn today, the cooperation of the parties and some flexibility to bring us to position we're in, actually finishing early in terms of the main evidence. I don't think we'd probably fit closing submissions in there. Would be a bit tight. And I think, Mr. Village, you probably set a record for the shortest cross-examination ever. Oh, I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there were two records I think were set: the shortest cross-examination and the longest re-examination on the shortest cross-examination, which Mr. Barrett holds that record.
Both aiming to get into the Guinness Book of Records. Right. Well, again, thank you all for your contributions to date. And we shall resume on the 30th of November. Just make sure I get that right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Village. Thank you, Mr. Barrett.